The need to explain yourself did not disappear because you finally learned how to communicate better. It dropped because something more fundamental released its grip. There was a time when explanation felt necessary for stability. You explained to be understood. You explained to soften reactions before they could form. You explained so the internal logic of your choices wouldn't be misread once it crossed into the outer world. It wasn't vanity. It wasn't insecurity in the way people usually describe it. It was a form of control that made uncertainty tolerable. You can feel the difference now. Not as confidence, but as absence. Moments arrive where words used to assemble themselves automatically, and now nothing forms. Not resistance. Not restraint. Just no internal request for narration. Silence appears faster than explanation ever did. And it doesn't feel unfinished. It feels self-contained. The system notices this and pauses, as if checking whether something important was skipped. Nothing was. Something familiar has stopped activating, and it hasn't been replaced yet. That unresolved gap stays open. What has changed is not your ability to explain yourself. It is the relevance of explanation itself. You still notice ambiguity. You still register when something could be interpreted in more than one way. But the urgency that once followed that recognition no longer arrives. The impulse to clarify slows down before it becomes action, like a reflex that loses traction mid-movement. Before, ambiguity demanded response. It created internal motion. Now ambiguity can exist without mobilizing you. You might catch this in ordinary moments. Someone misunderstands your tone. A decision you make lands without context. A silence stretches where explanation once rushed in. The system observes the opening and remains where it is. That is new. Not because you are detached. Because nothing inside you treats misinterpretation as a threat anymore. The mind waits for discomfort that never comes. The body does not tense. The moment holds. And nothing is resolved yet. Earlier, explanation functioned as a bridge you felt responsible for maintaining. If meaning drifted, you adjusted it. If intention blurred, you stepped in. That responsibility lived quietly beneath interactions. You may not have noticed how often you were editing in real time, adding context, smoothing edges, monitoring reception. Not out of dishonesty, but out of a belief that stability required accurate mirroring. The system depended on that work. Now that engagement has loosened. You can feel it in the body first. The place where explanation used to rise now stays still. Not guarded. Not withdrawn. Still, you allow moments to land without escorting them into coherence. If confusion appears, it is allowed to exist without immediate repair. This does not feel careless. It feels proportionate. The system is learning something it did not know before, and it hasn't finished learning it yet. What makes this shift unfamiliar is that it wasn't decided. You did not choose to stop explaining yourself. Decisions like that would still orbit explanation. This is different. The system learned through repetition that nothing collapses when explanation doesn't arrive. Conversations ended without follow-up. Relationships continued. Reality moved forward without correction. Over time, the reflex lost authority. You may notice this most clearly after interactions now. They actually end. There is no internal replay. No audit of what you should have clarified. No quiet planning for a future explanation that might be needed. The moment closes when it closes. That absence can feel strange at first. The mind briefly checks for unfinished business. There isn't any. And the opening scene remains unresolved, not as tension, but as space. As this continues, explanation stops being a stabilizer. Stability begins to come from somewhere else. You remain intact even when someone holds an incomplete version of you. You remain coherent even when meaning is ambiguous. You remain yourself without constant translation. This alters the rhythm of interaction. Silence becomes part of the exchange instead of a gap that needs to be filled. Pauses no longer feel like errors. Time no longer feels like a threat where misunderstanding might grow if left unmanaged. You can let hours pass without returning internally to adjust the past. The future is no longer tasked with repair. Identity becomes quieter here. Less performative. less defended. And still, nothing is being concluded yet. There may still be moments where the old impulse flickers. A reaction you didn't expect. A silence that lingers longer than usual. The explanation forms halfway and dissolves. Not suppressed. Not resisted. Unsupported. The body no longer prepares for narration. Breathing stays even. Muscles remain where they are. The nervous system does not interpret uncertainty as a call to action. This matters. The habit of explanation was never only cognitive. Without physiological backing, the reflex cannot complete itself. Words, when they arrive now, come from clarity rather than urgency. And when they don't arrive, nothing feels withheld. The system rests in its own coherence. Eventually, the opening scene integrates without announcement. You realize that your integrity does not depend on being fully understood. That explanation was never what made you stable. It was compensating for the belief that you weren't. That belief has dissolved. You still explain when it serves the moment. You still clarify when clarity matters. But silence is no longer risky, and partial understanding no longer threatens you. You are not disengaged. You are unburdened. The need to explain yourself did not get suppressed. It became unnecessary. And because it is unnecessary, it keeps dropping on its own, without effort, without strategy, without commentary. As the experience simply continues beyond this point, already complete in its movement.